I still remember the day I stumbled upon the ancient tome, hidden away in the dusty recesses of a forgotten library. It was as if the very walls were whispering secrets to me, drawing me closer to the forbidden knowledge within. The air was thick with the scent of decay and forgotten dreams, and I felt a shiver run down my spine as I opened the worn leather cover. The pages were yellowed and crackling, filled with strange symbols and arcane diagrams that seemed to dance across the parchment like malevolent spirits. It was then that I knew I had to uncover the truth behind King Solomon's demons, a tale of dark magic and unspeakable horrors that had haunted humanity for centuries. As I delved deeper into the book, I began to realize that this was no ordinary text. The words seemed to shift and writhe on the page, as if alive and watching me. I felt a creeping sense of dread that spread through my veins like ice, and yet I couldn't look away from the horrors that lurked within its pages. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an ancient passage, penned in a language I didn't understand, that I knew I had to share this discovery with someone. But as I looked around the deserted library, I realized I was not alone. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, twisting and writhing like living things. And then I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the edge of perception, watching me with eyes that burned like embers from the depths of hell. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew I had stumbled upon something much darker, something that threatened to consume me whole. This is my story, a tale of obsession and madness that will take you to the very limits of human sanity. It's a journey into the heart of darkness, where the lines between reality and myth blur, and the supernatural and the sinister entwine. Are you prepared to face the horrors within? I spent the next few days poring over the ancient text, deciphering the cryptic symbols and arcane diagrams that filled its pages. It was as if I had stumbled upon a doorway to a hidden world, one that existed beyond the boundaries of our mundane reality. The words seemed to leap off the page, speaking directly to me in a language that only I could understand. I became obsessed with uncovering the secrets of King Solomon's demons, convinced that they held the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. As I delved deeper into the book, I began to notice strange occurrences around me. Objects would move on their own, and I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. At first, I dismissed it as mere paranoia, but deep down, I knew that something was amiss. One night, as I pored over the ancient text in a state of fevered concentration, I stumbled upon a passage that made my blood run cold. It spoke of the creation of the demons, beings of pure malevolence forged from the very essence of darkness and despair. The words seemed to sear themselves into my brain, leaving an indelible mark on my psyche. And then I heard it, a low, rasping whisper that seemed to come from all around me. It was a voice, but not one that I recognized. It spoke a single word over and over again: Azazel. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that washed over me, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that I had stumbled upon something much darker, something that threatened to consume me whole. I spent the next few weeks searching for any mention of King Solomon's demons in ancient texts. I scoured dusty libraries and forgotten archives, poring over manuscripts and scrolls that spoke of dark magic and forbidden knowledge. The more I read, the more I became convinced that this was a tale of great significance, one that held the key to understanding some of humanity's darkest secrets. I found references to Solomon in ancient texts from Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia, each telling a slightly different story about the king's dealings with demons and other supernatural beings. Some spoke of him as a wise and just ruler, who used his knowledge of magic to bring peace and prosperity to his people. Others portrayed him as a power-hungry tyrant, who made pacts with demons in exchange for wealth and influence. But one thing was clear: Solomon's dealings with the supernatural were shrouded in mystery and terror. I began to feel like I was uncovering a hidden history, one that had been deliberately concealed from the world. The more I read, the more I became convinced that King Solomon's demons was not just a myth, but a real and present danger. And then I stumbled upon an ancient text that made my blood run cold. It was a fragment of a poem, penned in a language that I didn't recognize. But as I looked at the words, I felt a shiver run down my spine. They seemed to speak directly to me, warning me away from a path that I had already begun to follow. The poem read, "In twilight's hush, where shadows play, seek out the demons of the night. They will reveal to you the secrets of old, but at a price, dear seeker, that may be too high to pay." I knew then that I was playing with fire, and that I had to be careful not to get burned. But it was too late for that. I had already set in motion a chain of events that would lead me down a path from which there was no return. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But as the days went by, I found myself becoming increasingly obsessed with the idea of finding the demons of King Solomon's demons. I spent every waking moment researching, poring over ancient texts, and scouring the internet for any mention of the supernatural beings. My friends and family began to notice a change in me, a growing sense of detachment and isolation that seemed to be suffocating them. They tried to reach out to me, to bring me back from the brink of madness, but I pushed them away. I was convinced that I was on the verge of something huge, something that would change my life forever. And so, I pressed on, driven by a fierce determination that bordered on obsession. I began to experience strange and vivid dreams, full of symbols and images that seemed to be trying to tell me something. In these dreams, I saw myself standing in front of an ancient temple, surrounded by demons that seemed to be watching me with cold, calculating eyes. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, but at the same time, I was drawn to the temple, as if it held some secret that only I could unlock. I knew then that I had to find out what lay within its walls. The obsession took hold of me like a vice, squeezing tight and refusing to let go. And so, I made the decision to embark on a journey into the heart of darkness, to confront the demons head-on and uncover the secrets of King Solomon's demons once and for all. I knew that I had to act fast if I was going to uncover the secrets of King Solomon's demons. So, I began to prepare for a midnight ritual, one that would take me to the very limits of my sanity and beyond. I spent hours poring over ancient texts, searching for any mention of rituals or incantations that might unlock the door to the supernatural realm. Finally, I found it, a single passage from an ancient grimoire that spoke of a midnight ritual that would summon forth the demons of the night. The words were cryptic and unsettling, but I knew that they held the key to unlocking the secrets of King Solomon's demons. I spent hours preparing for the ritual, gathering all of the necessary materials and ingredients in advance. As the clock struck midnight, I stood before a small altar, surrounded by candles and strange artifacts that seemed to hold a power all their own. I took a deep breath and began to recite the incantation, my voice echoing through the night air as I called forth the demons of the night. The words felt strange on my tongue, like a foreign language that I was struggling to master. But as I spoke them aloud, I felt a power building inside me, a power that seemed to grow with every passing moment. The air around me began to thicken and swirl, like a maelstrom of darkness and chaos. And then I saw it, a figure standing before me, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was Azazel, the Demon King, come to claim me as his own. As I gazed into Azazel's eyes, I felt a surge of energy course through my veins. The Demon King spoke to me in a voice that was both ancient and eternal, its words echoing through my mind like a mantra. "You have called us forth, mortal," it said. "Now you must pay the price." I knew then that I had unleashed a power beyond my control, a power that would change me forever. Azazel raised its hand, and I felt a searing pain as a needle of light pierced my skin. The demon's touch was like a key turning in a lock, unlocking the secrets of the ancient ritual. I felt myself being drawn into a realm beyond the mortal world, a realm where demons ruled supreme. The air around me grew thick with the stench of brimstone and smoke, and I knew that I was being initiated into a world of darkness and chaos. The Demon King began to chant in a language that was both familiar and yet completely alien, its words weaving a spell of binding and submission. I felt my mind expanding, as if it was being stretched to the breaking point. My consciousness was torn apart and reassembled, like a puzzle being solved in reverse. And when the ritual was complete, I knew that I had been forever changed. The Demon King's eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire as it spoke its final words. "You are now one of us, mortal. You will walk among the shadows, forever bound to our service." I knew then that my life would never be the same again. I was no longer human, but a servant of the demons, bound to their will by ancient powers and forbidden knowledge. I knew that I had to navigate this new world with caution, for I was no longer fully human. The demon's words still echoed in my mind as I stepped into the shadows, trying to make sense of my newfound existence. I walked through alleys and side streets, avoiding the watchful eyes of humans who seemed oblivious to the supernatural realm that existed alongside theirs. My senses were heightened, and I could feel the presence of others like me lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was a woman, her skin as white as marble, her hair as black as the night sky. She introduced herself as Lilith, a demoness who had been sent to guide me on my journey. Her voice was husky and seductive, sending shivers down my spine as she spoke of the secrets that lay hidden within the shadows. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself, something that threatened to consume me whole. Lilith's eyes seemed to bore into my soul as she asked me a single question. "Are you ready to surrender to our world?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay ahead, but the demoness's words echoed in my mind like a promise. "Surrender, and you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams." I took a deep breath, knowing that there was no turning back. With a nod, I accepted her offer, and Lilith reached out to claim me as one of their own. As I stepped into the world of demons, I felt an intense pull towards the infernal realm. Lilith's guidance was invaluable, but she seemed to be leading me deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness. The further we walked, the more I could feel the air thickening with malevolent energy. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending to accommodate our presence. We traversed through realms of burning fire and scorching deserts, where creatures that defied explanation lurked in every shadow. The stench of brimstone hung heavy over us, a constant reminder of the power that we wielded. And yet, despite the awe-inspiring terror that surrounded me, I felt an insatiable hunger within. It was as if my very soul was crying out for something more, something that only the infernal realm could provide. Lilith seemed to sense my growing fascination, and she smiled knowingly. "The call of the infernal is a siren's song," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the demonic chorus. It is a summons that cannot be ignored. As we journeyed deeper into the heart of darkness, I began to feel an eerie sense of familiarity. It was as if I had been here before, though I knew that was impossible. The memories stirred deep within me, like embers glowing in the dark. And then I saw it, a vision of myself standing at the edge of this very realm, ready to take the first step into the abyss. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized the truth. I had been born for this moment, destined to answer the call of the infernal. As I stood at the threshold of the infernal realm, I felt my mind begin to unravel like a thread pulled from a tapestry. The colors around me became more vivid, more intense, and yet somehow less real. Lilith's smile seemed to grow wider, her eyes glinting with a malevolent glee that made my skin crawl. "The further you descend," she whispered, "the more you will find." I took a step forward, and the world around me began to distort. The buildings twisted and writhed like living things, their walls pulsing with a dark energy that seemed to seep into my very bones. The air was heavy with an unseen presence, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes that made my skin prickle with unease. I stumbled forward, my senses reeling from the sheer intensity of the experience. And yet, despite the growing sense of madness that threatened to consume me whole, I felt a strange sense of exhilaration. It was as if I had finally found what I had been searching for all along, the ultimate thrill, the rush of power that came with surrendering to the infernal. The world around me became a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds, a mad whirlwind of sensations that threatened to overwhelm my very sanity. And yet, even as I teetered on the brink of madness, I knew that I would never look back. For in this moment, I was free from the constraints of human thought, free from the limitations of mortal fear. I was a servant of the infernal, a pawn in their grand game of power and deception. And with that realization, I took another step forward, into the abyss. As I descended deeper into the infernal realm, I began to notice a subtle change in the atmosphere. The twisted buildings and pulsing walls seemed to be giving way to a more organized structure, as if the very fabric of reality was being rearranged to accommodate some hidden purpose. Lilith led me through a maze of dark corridors, each one lined with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. The air was thick with incense, a pungent aroma that burned my nostrils and filled my lungs with its noxious fumes. We passed by rows of cultists, their eyes vacant and their skin deathly pale. They moved in unison, their chanting growing louder as we approached the heart of the infernal realm. I recognized the words now. They were an ancient incantation, one that I had studied in my darkest moments when I thought myself alone. The cult of the infernal was a name that whispered fear into the hearts of mortals, and yet here it seemed to be growing stronger by the minute. Lilith stopped before a massive stone door adorned with symbols of fire and brimstone. She turned to me, her eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. "The heart of the infernal awaits," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chanting of the cultists. "Are you prepared to witness its power?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. With a wave of her hand, the stone door creaked open, revealing a vast chamber filled with an unholy light that seemed to sear itself into my very soul. As I stepped into the heart of the infernal, I felt a sense of trepidation wash over me. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent power that threatened to consume me whole. Lilith stood before me, her eyes blazing with an inner fire that seemed to burn brighter with every passing moment. "Behold," she whispered, her voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "The entity of the infernal." I followed her gaze, and my eyes widened as I beheld a creature of unspeakable horror. It was a mass of writhing tendrils and pulsing organs, its very presence seeming to warp the fabric of reality itself. The entity regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze, its eyes like two burning embers that seemed to pierce my very soul. I felt my mind reeling, my grip on sanity tenuous at best. And yet, despite the overwhelming sense of dread that threatened to consume me whole, I knew that I had to confront this creature head-on if I was to survive. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "I am here," I declared, my voice steady and firm. "I am ready to face whatever terror you have in store for me." The entity regarded me for a moment, its gaze burning with an intense, almost palpable energy. And then, in an instant that seemed to last an eternity, it spoke. Its voice was like a chorus of screams, a cacophony of terror that seemed to shake the very foundations of my being. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its words dripping with malevolent intent. "Now, you will never leave." As the entity's words hung in the air, I felt a sense of inevitability wash over me. I knew that I had to make a choice, either surrender to the infernal realm and risk losing myself forever, or try to find a way back to the world I once knew. Lilith's hand closed around mine, her grip like a vice, as she pulled me deeper into the heart of the entity's lair. The air grew hotter, the shadows twisting and writhing like living things as we descended further into the abyss. We reached a vast underground chamber filled with a sea of burning lava, the flames licking at our feet like hungry serpents. In the center of the room, the entity waited for us, its presence like a palpable force that seemed to fill every molecule of air. "This is the final test," it declared, its voice like thunder on a summer's day. "Will you join me in my eternal reign, or will you try to find your way back to the world above?" I looked at Lilith, her eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity as she nodded for me to speak. I took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change my fate forever. "I refuse." The entity's face contorted in rage, its tendrils writhing like snakes as it let out a scream of fury that shook the very foundations of the underworld. And then, in an instant that seemed to last an eternity, everything went black.